Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. The founder, the president of the Article 3 Project. It is Mike Davis. Mike, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So I know that you caught part of the space last night. It's all anybody's talking about, 100 million listens or something by now, and it's just going to keep on growing. It was interesting because the left media tried to, and the left in politics, like Swalwell, tried to say literally nobody's listening to this space. And literally nobody was, because there was a DDoS attack for 45 minutes stopping anybody from getting in and listening. But once it started going, it had, at the same time, 1.3 million listeners, breaking all records. And then, of course, as I just said, about 100 million plus as we're doing this interview. It's going to keep on growing. How is it that the left thinks that people are dumb enough to buy the garbage they're saying? I'll give you an example from some outlet I never heard of before, Politic USA or some crap. And they literally wrote this. Trump warns that he'll flee or suggests he'll flee to Venezuela if he loses. And then the writer writes that he wouldn't be fleeing because of Kamala Harris. He'd be fleeing to avoid prosecution. Now, Mike, there are some dumb people that will believe this writer said something true when it's not even close to the truth. So how do we combat that if everybody didn't sit and listen to that 2 hours last night?
Well, I want to say thank God for Elon Musk, this benevolent billionaire who spent, what was it, $44 billion to buy this online app called Twitter. It's now called X, and you have two of the most powerful men on the planet sitting down and having a no-holds-barred 2-hour conversation, more than 2-hour conversation. You're not going to get that out of Kamala Harris. Certainly not Joe Biden. He wouldn't be able to keep it together that long. But Kamala Harris, she couldn't keep up for 2 hours. She'd have to read talking points the whole time. She doesn't have the intellect. She doesn't have the intellectual firepower to do what President Trump just did last night with Elon Musk. And that's why the Democrats are trying to destroy X. Look what they did to Parler. With the old Twitter, they said, if you don't like the censorship, if you don't like the old Twitter, build your own. And so what happened? You had a startup called Parler, right? Yes. And so how did big tech respond? You had Google and Apple kick Parler out of the App Store duopoly, and then Amazon kick Parler off the internet. And I think that as we head into this election over the next 80-some days, 85 days, whatever it is, watch the Democrats make a play to try to take out Elon Musk's X, because they know how powerful a tool it is, because you can go right around the media filters and go right to the American people with X.
That's the thing. They circumvented the mainstream or legacy media last night, and they were really, really mad. Jim Sciutto from CNN, a guy who used to be a good reporter. I met him back in '97. We were both covering the Flint strike at the GM plant. He actually was a good reporter. Now he's not anymore. Now he's completely owned by the left. He tweeted something or posted something to the effect of, "It is not an interview if you are donating to and endorsing the person you're interviewing." And I thought to myself, if I interview my mother, who I love, that's not an interview. That's just me talking to somebody who who birthed me. If I interview Mike Davis, who I like, I consider you a friend, Mike. Is this not really an interview? It's just a couple of guys spinning the narrative that Jim Sciutto has to straighten out. I mean, this is how desperate they're getting. They want people to stop using the word interview. Come on.
Didn't he work in the Obama White House or in the Obama?
I don't know, but he's been attached to the left for a long time. And again, I met him when he was a young whippersnapper, and he was really doing good reporting. But again, you've got Jake Tapper is the same guy. Dana Bash, how she treated J.D. Vance all weekend. These people still think they have the power that you just eloquently said they don't have anymore.
I mean, that's just it. They don't control information anymore. You used to have these liberal networks control information. Then Fox came along, and then they tried to take out Fox, and then you have Elon Musk coming along. The good thing about Elon Musk is he has very deep pockets, and so they can't just take him out like they've taken out other conservative networks in the past, and they can't muzzle him, right? And so that's what scares the hell out of the left, is they can't control information, they can't control commerce, and this was why I've been pushing for years to break up big tech. If Google competed against YouTube instead of acquired YouTube, it would be a hell of a lot less likely that Google and YouTube would be censoring conservatives and others with whom they disagree.
You know, you're right. Sciutto was the chief of staff and senior advisor to the U.S. ambassador to China, Gary Locke, under Obama. So he was a political appointee. Good job on you, Mike. Go in and support what he does. See, he knows stuff. Article3project.org, article3project.org. It's Mike Davis. So as we're watching all this unfold and as we're seeing them flop around, immediately the Harris campaign complained equal time, equal time, equal time. Of course, Elon Musk said, hey, Kamala Harris, you're welcome to come on here for a 2-hour space with me as well, something she hasn't responded to. But I did notice the email complaining about equal time and misinformation. They also said, just give us $25 and we'll be able to stop Trump. They literally tried to make a campaign, a donation, a fundraising event out of it, yet she ignored the invitation to come on. Surprised?
I would love for Kamala Harris to
great?
have equal time. Go on, Kamala, for 2 hours to Elon Musk X and just have a discussion with him for 2 hours. I think he would be fair and just go do it. The problem is the Democrats know she can't do it because she's incompetent. She's not smart and she couldn't keep up. And the American people would see it. They're gonna run the Joe Biden basement strategy with Kamala Harris between now and the election. They're praying for another COVID outbreak because they know that Kamala Harris is not smart enough to do interviews. They know that she's not smart enough to do these debates. They know that she's not smart enough to be on the stump. And look, she's been the vice president for almost 3.5 years. She was the border czar, even though she pretends like she wasn't. She was the tie-breaking vote in the Senate as the vice president to blow open spending. Biden's spending spree was Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote. She was the tie-breaking vote to add 87,000 IRS agents to go after waiters and waitresses on their tips. And now she pretends like the only policy proposal she has is stealing Trump's and saying that she's not going to tax tips. If you're not going to tax tips, why did you hire 87,000 IRS agents to go after service industry workers?
And in February of 23, that was an actual report. That was part of why they wanted all of these extra IRS agents, because they said that people who are working for tips were not paying their fair share. And now she's going to give them a break on tips. Now, when you see something like that, Mike, when she makes that announcement the other day, either she doesn't know that's a Trump policy, and she probably doesn't. As you said, she's not that smart. But the people surrounding her and making those talking points do know that that was a Trump policy that he unveiled 2 months and 2 days earlier. So how does she think she gets away with that? Hoping that there are dumb people?
Well, because she has the mainstream media that will just prop her up between now and the election like they did with Joe Biden. Look, this is what I would say to Trump supporters, to right-thinking independents, even right-thinking Democrats. We can win this race for President Trump, but we need to do our jobs. We need to get out there. We need to register to vote. We need to get our friends and family and neighbors and colleagues to register to vote. We need to vote as early as possible. Bank your votes, because if you think the BLM and Antifa riots were bad in 2020, wait till the Hamas riots come in 2024. Do not wait till election day to vote. You may not have the opportunity to vote.
Article3project.org, that's the website. Go and support everything Mike does. And again, we're seeing the lies on the campaign trail and her reading the same speech in every place she goes. But then there's Tim Walz. Tim Walz is a very good speaker. He's dynamic. He seems like folksy Midwestern Minnesota Tim. But it turns out he's a big fat lying liar. I had the actual command sergeant major on the other day, Tom Behrens, and he went down the list of exactly what the timeline was, and that Walz left because he knew they were going to be deployed. He has been lying about his rank. He's been lying about carrying a weapon of war in war. Is this guy going to be the vice presidential nominee, do you think? I don't know how they get away from all of the information that's out there. Minnesota was able to hide this when he ran for governor. They verified it, the media did in Minnesota. Then they decided to hide it. They can't hide it on a national level. You and I are talking about it in front of 5 to 6 million listeners right now. Is he going to be the guy?
Man, it is up in the air. And I would say this shows that Kamala Harris has horrific judgment. She either did not properly vet Tim Walz, who is way too close to China and is way too close to these Hamas supporters in Minneapolis, and whose wife opened the window during the BLM riot so she can smell the tires burning and savor the tires burning. They talk about Trump supporters being weird. These people are weird. Tim Walz demands that we put tampons in boys' bathrooms. He pushes transgender ideology on kids. He wants to make Minnesota the Mecca for trans surgeries and other life-destroying, lifelong procedures on kids, where you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this so-called gender-affirming care, this child butchery where they're taking off their genitals and giving them hormone pills the rest of their lives. They want to make Minnesota, Tim Walz wants to make Minnesota the abortion capital of America, where people can get abortions up until the moment of birth, even after birth, they're not required to provide care. He doesn't want these doctors to provide
You just
care
let
to
the baby
these
die.
dying
Yeah.
babies. These people are sick.
Yeah.
These people are weird. They are the extremist.
But you're right. She didn't properly vet him, but Obama or somebody chose this guy. They could have gone with Shapiro, but I think you and I would agree. Probably they were afraid that Shapiro, who wanted to be in the IDF at one point and is a very pro-Israel Democrat, he probably would have hurt them with the Palestinian crowd. That's probably why they went away from him. But when it comes to the legalities, and you may not know individual states, but when it comes to the legalities of who's going to be on the ballot in November, there are 2 or 3 states, Mike, that say the person who won the most delegates in the primaries is going to be on the ballot in November. How do they get around that?
That's a very good question. I mean, they're Democrats, and so they'll
Yeah.
use the Mark Eliases of the world to just get around whatever laws in their way. That's the laws never stopped them in the past. But it's very interesting that we have Joe Biden, who got 14 million Democrat primary votes, and then Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer and others apparently sat in a smoke-filled back room and ousted Biden in a bloodless coup, threw out 14 million Democrat primary votes and installed Kamala Harris, who has not won a primary vote in her life. And then that's supposed to be under the guise of democracy. These Democrats pretend like they're for democracy. They pretend like they're for election integrity when they just tossed out 14 million Democrat
Right.
primary votes to install Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's stunning, and they're going to do it. You're right. In 2020, they counted mail-in ballots that were not illegal or that were not legal. In many states, mail-in ballots were not decided and signed into law by individual state governors from their legislatures. The Constitution says the legislature will say how general elections are going to be conducted in individual states. They just said, no, we're just going to take all the mail-in ballots. And then when people sued, like Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump and others, what the judges said was, you don't really have standing. They didn't say that they didn't have a good case. They just said they didn't have standing, which of course they did. So you're right. I mean, sadly, you're right. Even if the state law doesn't provide that you can do this, they're just going to change the name. It's just like these states that try to take Trump's name off the ballot, and they had no right to do that. So I think that you're spot on with that. Let's talk about Neil Gorsuch's book. I know that you worked for him. He's your former boss. He seems like a really nice guy. He seems to understand the text of the Constitution and makes rulings according to that. What is the book about?
Justice Gorsuch is putting out a new book called Overruled. And it's about how there are too many laws in America, particularly laws by executive branch bureaucrats who have no power under the Constitution to make these rules that are essentially they're laws. You have to follow these rules by these administrative agencies, these unelected, largely unaccountable bureaucrats. And Justice Gorsuch, along with his former law clerk and my former colleague, Janie Nitza, put out this book, Overruled, that you can get online now, that talks about the dangers of having too many laws in this country and how it trips up. Look, these big corporations have no problem with these laws. Oftentimes, these big corporations want these laws. For example, Facebook calls for regulations. Well, of course, Facebook's calling for regulations because they have the army of lawyers and lobbyists and accountants and others who can afford to navigate Facebook around these regulations, but they hurt startup competitors. They hurt small businesses. They hurt real Americans and real America. And that's the point of Justice Gorsuch's book, is we have too many laws and we need to rethink how we approach the law in America.
It is Mike Davis. Go get that book. It's called Overruled by Justice Neil Gorsuch. When you're watching the attacks on the Supreme Court from the executive, the lies about the Supreme Court, the lies about the Chevron deference decision, which literally took power away from unelected bureaucrats and took power away from the executive branch and left the power where it's supposed to be with the legislature. When you see people attack the court like it's doing something, it's radical. Mike, when did it become radical to actually follow the Constitution? I know that most people don't understand the Constitution, don't understand the separations of power, don't understand that the executive has had overwhelming power since 1984 in the original ruling. How do you get through to them that you need a balance of power or else one will become a monarchy and overrun the other two?
That's exactly right. We are a constitutional republic, and it was a radical concept more than 250 years ago when we started this country and enacted our U.S. Constitution. Our U.S. Constitution is a loan agreement. between we the people and our governments. We the people loan our governments, the federal, state, tribal governments, specific, enumerated, and divided powers. In exchange for loaning them power, they're supposed to protect our liberties. And unless it's spelled out in the Constitution, unless we specifically loan it to our governments in the U.S. Constitution, our governments do not have that power. And if they do have that power, it's supposed to be divided. Congress writes the laws, the executive branch enforces the laws, and the judiciary decides cases and controversies, right? And that power, the federal government, starting 90 years ago under FDR, the switch in time that saved 9, where they misinterpreted the Commerce Clause, the federal government grabbed power that we did not loan to the federal governments, and then that power has been consolidated with executive branch bureaucrats. That is the very definition of tyranny. That is why during COVID, we had the CDC, these unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats making decisions that affected all of our lives, decisions that ended up being wrong, like the mask mandates and the 6-foot rule, that both were not based upon accurate science and destroyed and disrupted our lives. That is, our founders would roll over in their graves if they saw where we are as a country today.
I agree. It's Mike Davis. Go and follow him everywhere. MRMDDMIA. Is that no? Mike, say what is? I usually get it, but I think I screwed it up that time.
You're right. It's MRDDMIA. My initials MRD, and then Des Moines, Iowa. DMIA.
Go follow him everywhere right now. He's a great follow, and he does incredible threads. Maybe 30 seconds on this, Mike. Yesterday, Trump announced that he's suing the DOJ for the Mar-a-Lago raid for $100 million. Legal scholars have jumped out to say he has no chance of this. I think he's got a chance. What do you think?
Are these the same legal scholars who said he had no chance with presidential immunity?
Yes.
The same legal scholars who said the Supreme Court wasn't going to rule for the criminal defendants in the Fisher case. These legal scholars are partisan hacks. They need to go look up 18 U.S.C. 241, 18 U.S.C. 242. They need to go look up these federal civil rights laws. The Biden-Kamala Justice Department, along with these Biden-Kamala Democrats, have trampled over President Trump's clearly established constitutional rights. He's going to get discovery in this case, and it's not going to be good for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and these partisan hack prosecutors, judges, and lawyers across America. They better lawyer up.
I hope you're right, Mike, and usually are. Is Mike Davis? Go follow him. MD. He said it earlier. If you look up Mike Davis on X or anywhere else, it's going to come up. Mike, I appreciate your friendship and great knowledge. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Joe.
We're back after this. Stay right here.